4 years had passed since the night Bo nearly lost his life. 4 years since the night our world changed. The scars had healed, but the memory lingered. Abigail and I tried to move on, to fall back into our routine, but something had shifted in the air. Bo could feel it. I could feel it too. It started small, little things that didn't feel right. I'd step outside to gather firewood and feel something watching me from the tree line. I'd pause, rifle in hand, listening to the wind, but nothing ever revealed itself. Sometimes in the dead of night, I'd wake up to find Bo standing outside, his massive frame barely visible in the dark, his head tilted toward the woods, listening. At first, I tried to ignore it, but then the forest changed. The sounds weren't the same. For as long as I had lived here, the woods were full of life, owls hooting, crickets chirping. Now, there were nights where everything fell deathly silent. The kind of silence that didn't feel right. The kind that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. Bo started acting different, more restless, more on edge. At night, he no longer slept in his shelter behind the house. Instead, he stayed closer, either crouched near the porch or pacing along the tree line, his eyes locked onto the darkened woods. And then there were the nights when he wouldn't move at all. I'd step outside to find him standing statue still, his nostrils flaring, his ears twitching. His breathing would be slow, measured, almost like he was trying to mask his presence. He wasn't watching the trees. He was listening. For what? I didn't know. But whatever it was, he could feel it out there. And so could I. The feeling of being watched never left. Even Abigail started noticing. "You've been sleeping with the rifle next to the bed again," she said one morning, her voice casual but weighted. I poured my coffee, staring out the window at Bo, who was seated just beyond the porch, his large form hunched forward, staring into the trees. "I don't like it," I muttered. She sighed. "It's been years, Clay." "I know." I rubbed a hand over my face. "But something isn't right." She didn't argue, because she felt it too. Then the tracks started appearing. At first, it was just a few claw marks in the dirt near the tree line. Deep, unnatural impressions, like something heavy had passed through. But then they got closer. One morning, I stepped outside and found them circling the damn house. These weren't old tracks. The snow hadn't had time to settle into them. Something had been here. Bo smelled them before I did. He crouched low, sniffing the disturbed snow, his lip curling slightly. He let out a low, guttural sound, something between a growl and a warning. I knelt down beside him, running my fingers through the indentations. The prints were large, too large to be a wolf. These claw marks were deep, almost like whatever made them had lingered, digging into the earth as it stood there. I gripped my rifle tighter. Something was coming. Bo became more aggressive. I'd never seen him like that before. He was always alert, always cautious, but this was different. One night, I found him standing at the porch steps, his breathing rapid, his fists clenched at his sides. His entire body trembled with restrained tension, his eyes locked onto something beyond the trees. I stepped beside him, rifle in hand, but I saw nothing. "What is it, Bo?" I muttered. He didn't respond. He didn't move. He just stared. Then, after what felt like an eternity, he let out a deep breath and stepped away, shaking his head, but his posture never fully relaxed. It was like he was preparing for something. Then came the night that changed everything. The air had that sharp, biting chill that came before autumn truly settled in. The fire crackled in the living room as Abigail flipped through a book and I sat at the table, cleaning my rifle. Bo was outside, as he always was. Suddenly, everything went silent. The wind died. The insects stopped. Seconds later, Bo roared. Not just a warning, not just a sound of dominance. This was a war cry. I jumped to my feet, rifle in hand, as Abigail scrambled up beside me. My pulse pounded in my ears. I could hear something in the distance, the sounds of something moving through the woods. Shapes flickered between the trees, glowing eyes cutting through the darkness. 1, 2, 3, more. I felt my stomach drop. Abigail grabbed her rifle, her hands trembling slightly. "I see them," she said. Bo stood just beyond the porch, his massive frame silhouetted against the dark. His shoulders were squared, his breathing deep and steady. A pack of dogmen stepped into the clearing, not as big as the one Bo had killed before, but they didn't need to be, because there were 6 of them, and they were here for blood. I swallowed hard, gripping my rifle tighter. One of the dogmen snarled, and the world exploded into chaos. The moment the first dogman charged, Bo moved. He didn't wait. He didn't hesitate. He met them. His massive frame thundered across the dirt, slamming into the first dogman before it could even react. The impact sent the creature flying, slamming against a nearby tree. But there were 5 more. They swarmed. The second and third lunged together, one snapping at Bo's leg while the other went for his throat. Bo twisted, just barely dodging the bite, and sent his elbow crashing down on the one at his side. The beast yelped, but latched onto him anyway, claws ripping into his fur. Abigail fired first. The sound of her rifle split through the night, and one of the dogmen staggered back with a sharp, pained snarl. It wasn't a kill shot, but it was enough to make the thing think twice. I fired next. My bullet tore into another, sending it reeling, but just like before, these things were fast. Bo was in the thick of it now. His roars shook the air as he threw one of the dogmen down, his massive hands wrapping around its throat. He lifted it, snapping its spine in one brutal motion. But then the others were on him. One leapt onto his back, claws raking deep into his shoulder. Bo bellowed in pain, but before he could throw it off, another tackled his legs, bringing him down. "Get off of him," I yelled, firing another round. It was mayhem. 2 of the creatures peeled away from Bo and turned toward us. One was charging the porch. I barely had time to react before I fired. The bullet ripped into its chest, but it didn't stop. It staggered but kept coming. "Clay, move," Abigail screamed. I threw myself aside just as the beast slammed into the porch railing, its claws tearing deep gashes into the wood where I had just been standing. Abigail fired. The shot hit its leg, sending it stumbling. We were running out of ammo. I cursed under my breath, trying to reload, but my hands were shaking too much. He was losing. That didn't stop him from fighting like hell. One dogman had him by the arm, its jaws locked down, teeth sinking deep. Another was tearing into his side, claws raking open bloody wounds. Bo was still fighting, but I could see it now. His massive fists cracked bones, but there were too many. He fought hard, but it wasn't enough. One of them tackled him, slamming him to the ground. Another clamped its jaws around his throat. I tried to fire, but my rifle was empty. "Clay." Abigail's voice was desperate, but I could barely hear her. My heart was pounding, my vision tunneling. Bo was going to die. As I reached for my hunting knife, the trees shook. A deep, thunderous roar erupted from the forest. Louder than anything I had ever heard. It was deafening, rattling my bones, sending a wave of terror through my chest. Everything stopped. The dogmen froze. Bo, bloody and gasping, stared toward the tree line. Something barreled through the trees. Something massive. Something bigger than Bo. I stood in awe and fear. The creature emerged from the darkness, stepping into the clearing like a goddamn force of nature. It was a Sasquatch, but not just any Sasquatch. It was taller than Bo. Its fur was a mix of gray and brown. its muscles even thicker, its shoulders broader. It radiated power, the kind of presence that made even the Dogman hesitate. The moment it appeared, the Dogman changed. The snarls turned into whimpers, the confidence in their stance shattered. Even with their numbers, even with Bo bleeding at their feet, they were scared. The massive Sasquatch stepped forward, its deep-set eyes locking onto them. Then it roared again, and the world shook. Bo moved first. Wounded or not, he knew what had to be done. The pack scattered, but there was nowhere to run. Bo lunged at the nearest one, his massive fists crashing into its skull, sending it collapsing to the ground. The larger Sasquatch moved with insanely fast speed, grabbing another Dogman and slamming it into a tree with enough force to break its back. The remaining three tried to flee, but Bo and the other Sasquatch were faster. One was ripped apart in seconds. Another was thrown so hard it disappeared into the tree line. The last one barely made it past the clearing before the larger Sasquatch caught it. It didn't stand a chance. The Sasquatch grabbed the upper part of the Dogman's snout in one hand, lower part in the other, and pulled until its head separated in two different pieces. The battle was over. The ground was littered with bodies. The air smelled of blood. Bo turned and faced the Sasquatch. They stood there, staring at each other. Neither moved, neither communicated, but something passed between them. A moment of understanding, a connection. The larger Sasquatch lifted a hand, pressing it gently against Bo's shoulder. Bo didn't pull away. He did the same. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just another Sasquatch. This was his father. Abigail gripped my arm. "Clay," she whispered. That's his dad." I didn't answer. I didn't have to, because I could see it. The way they looked at each other. The recognition. The relief. Bo had spent his entire life alone. He had been taken from his mother, raised by us. But now, he was standing with his blood, his family, his father. The larger Sasquatch finally stepped back, his deep, wise eyes flickering toward me and Abigail. It was hard to tell how he felt by looking at us. But then, he did something I didn't expect. He nodded. A simple, slow nod. Not of hostility, not of warning, but of acknowledgement. Slowly, he turned, walking toward the trees. Bo watched him go. I could see the conflict in his face, the choice before him. His home was here, with us, but his blood was out there, in the forest. Bo stood there, staring into the trees for a long moment. He took a step forward, then another, and for a second, my heart clenched. Was this goodbye? Bo hesitated. After a couple seconds, he turned back to us, to his family, and stepped toward home. He wasn't leaving, not yet. The forest swallowed the larger Sasquatch, his massive form disappearing into the night. Something told me this wasn't the last time we'd see him. If you enjoyed this video, consider leaving a like, comment, and subscribe to Descent into the Unknown.